Us today.
Well, I am so happy to be here at the inaugural Climate Week here in Mumbai, and to thank you and ICC and everyone involved in bringing the attention and the energy to this issue where it belongs, right here in India, in the Global South, and hopefully many, many positive developments will come out of this inaugural gathering.
I hope so too. And Secretary Clinton, I know you're in India because you're visiting with partners and projects of the Clinton Global Initiative, or CGI, as many of us know it. But for those of us who aren't familiar with the work of CGI, could you tell us a bit more about it, please?
Well, the Clinton Global Initiative was started 20 years ago by my husband with the very simple but profound insight that we have to come together in partnership, literally across the globe, to get the best ideas, get the investment, get the energy to address the problems that challenge us. Governments, both national, state, such as the state government here sponsoring this conference, is an example. Philanthropies, individuals, businesses, corporations. So we've had, over the last 20 years, about 10,000 partners making commitments to solve problems that affect, at last count, more than 500 million people. Because the point is that each of us has something to contribute, but we may not know who our best partners would be. We may not know where to go with our good idea to get the funding that is needed to actually implement it. Governments may not know the best way to create public-private partnerships. So the expert team at the Clinton Global Initiative works all year long with partners to create these opportunities, to assist in implementation. Then we have our annual meeting in New York during UN General Assembly week. This year will be September 22nd and 23rd. And it's exciting. It's so exciting to see people come together, not just to talk and meet, but to make commitments, to follow up, and to actually make something happen.
And can you tell us a little bit about the work you're doing on climate and health, specifically focused here on the Global South?
Well, we are very focused on climate, health, and women. And that combination is important because women are on the front lines of climate change. Most climate refugees are women. Women, especially in the Global South, and obviously here in India, are very often working outdoors now in extreme heat. So we've been focused now for a number of years about how we get good solutions on both mitigation and adaptation. Obviously, we have a long portfolio of work in renewable energy. But we also have increasingly focused on adaptation at the local level. What can we do to make it possible for people to keep working under really extreme conditions? If I could, I'll give you one example. For now more than 30 years, I have worked with the Self-Employed Women's Association here in India, which is a great organization of about 3.5 million women across India who came together to assist one another, starting with microloans many years ago, and then advancing into assisting with working conditions and support. So it came to my attention a few years ago, the effects of extreme heat, particularly on women, are now being well documented. The physical effects, the absolute inability to continue working when it's 39 degrees Celsius, if you're raking salt in the Rajasthan desert, if you're a waste collector, if you are a construction worker. So I wanted to see that for myself, and I went to the desert in Gujarat, in the Rajasthan desert, to meet with the salt rakers. And these women are generational salt rakers, and India is a big producer of salt. So this is an economic issue. It's not just a health issue. And what they told me, and I could see it for myself, is that they used to be able, after the monsoons finished, to work from October to April. They would work all day from sunup to sundown, but by noon, by 1 o'clock, the temperatures are so extreme, they have to now start in the dead of night. And they made some changes themselves. They moved from diesel-powered pumps to solar-powered pumps. So they were working very hard to deal with this new challenge of heat. So we began through CGI trying to think of ways we could work to mitigate the effects of extreme heat. And one of our projects, which I wanted to mention to you, is creating a climate resilience fund to create a place where philanthropic dollars and corporate dollars, individual dollars could be aggregated to come up with ideas to assist people who are out there working. And one of our first products is an insurance product. We worked through the Clinton Global Initiative with Humanity Insured, which is a not-for-profit created by large insurance companies, the Howden Company in the UK and others have contributed, to see is there an insurance product that could be made available to working women and men, but we're focusing with our partner, SEWA, on women, because when it's too hot to work, they lose their income. If they cannot show up on that construction site, or if they can only work a half a day, and then they don't have the money to feed their children and to provide other necessities. So starting about 2-3 years ago, through the Clinton Global Initiative, we began working with Humanity Insured. And as I speak right now, we've got this product up and going. India is the example. It's the model. So SEWA contracted with Humanity Insured. Humanity Insured provided the product. SEWA collected the rupees from the women, put it into a fund. We now have 500,000 insurance holders here in India. And India will be the model for the rest of the Global South because of this CGI commitment. So it's a parametric product. You have to look at the data. Obviously, you have to prove that the temperature has reached a certain level, in this case 39 degrees Celsius, and then women can ask for reimbursement because they've lost their day's pay. That is just one example of what we think is possible and why the Clinton Global Initiative wants to partner with ICC, partner with all of you. We've got to get creative and innovative, and it's going to start in India, it's going to start in the Global South, and then it can travel the world to really deal with climate change at that very local, individual level.
Thank you for saying that. I think you've put it so beautifully. We were talking earlier, just before we came in, about how global solutions from the Global South really do need to be scaled. And the fact that we're having the first ever Climate Week here in India is definitely more than an event. I would say it's a declaration. The Global South is ready to set the climate agenda. It's necessary. And you were talking about the need to shift resources from the Global North to the South.
Well, that's why I was so excited to be invited to come, because what you are doing here is transformational. And I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you and I know how involved you were along with your partners. We have to focus attention on solutions in the places that are clearly now most affected by climate change. Obviously, the whole world is. We in the United States are having many more wildfires, many more severe storms, unusual heat patterns. But the front lines of the fight against global climate change is right here in the Global South. And I have full confidence that India can be the innovator, the implementer. That is why I came. I want to be a cheerleader for the efforts that can come out of India. And it will require partnerships between government at all levels here in India, businesses and corporations, philanthropies, family offices, activists. We all have to get at the same table, my friends. We all have to quit the talk, and start act. It is not possible for us to wait any longer. People are having the impact now. And if we think migration is a problem, dislocation, conflict in the world, climate will amplify that. So when you look at the world, much of the influence, the power, the innovation must move from the north to the south. We have to get our act together in the north. I mean, obviously, you all know we now have a president who denies climate change, and it's ideology. It's not reality. It is denying evidence and facts in our own country, let alone in the rest of the world. We cannot wait for the political change that I know will come to the United States, because that's a few years off. We have to build the models here. We have to do the innovation here. This insurance product that I mentioned to you, 500,000 policyholders now, women who've never had insurance for anything. So this is not only a good thing to do, it is smart. It is a new market. We have to be creative about how we bring the public and private and philanthropic sectors together. So I could not be more enthusiastic, I think you could tell, about being here with all of you and representing the Clinton Global Initiative, because we look for partners who want to do hard things and make a difference. And then when we see results, let's scale them. So you bringing everyone together for this first inaugural climate session here in Mumbai is, I am confident, the beginning of the change that needs to happen.
Thank you for saying that. I do think you've hit on something that, interestingly enough, I was going to come to next. You've talked about the need for systems change. At the ICC, we work with funders to help them move their giving towards impactful climate solutions. But something that I've been personally reflecting on a lot of late, especially given the fact that we are currently underway the largest intergenerational transfer of wealth from one generation to the next globally. Trillions of dollars are going to move. It is one of the most fundamental economic justice issues of our time. And it is built on those extractive systems that right now are accelerating the climate crisis. Are we simply destroying the planet and asking for those who've benefited most from it to pay and to fix it? Do we need to look at the role of philanthropy, not just as a charity or sort of supporting climate change as yet another cause? Or does philanthropy really need to now address a systems challenge, which is to fundamentally redistribute the source of power, wealth, accountability to those who need it the most?
I have always thought that philanthropy needs to do two things at once. It needs to help alleviate the kind of suffering, misery, disease, hunger that we can all see. We see it, we know it, and if we have a heart, we want to help. And that's exactly what has driven so much philanthropy. However, that is not enough. There's that old saying, if you want to feed a hungry person, give them a fish. If you want to end hunger, teach them to fish. We've got to address the structural, systemic problems that have created the kinds of issues that you all are concerned about, or you would not be here. And so to that extent, it does seem that philanthropy can do several things. I mentioned this climate resilience fund that we are establishing that began as a commitment through the Clinton Global Initiative. Philanthropy is providing the first dollars. It is providing the organizational, administrative efforts to set this fund up, to be sponsoring the efforts to reach out to other funders so that we can get it up and going, and then we can look at making systemic changes. And the systemic changes, when we think about climate change, just very roughly, are certainly in adaptation and mitigation. we have a lot of philanthropy in the United States, as well as here in India, that is a result of the huge amounts of money that have been made from fossil fuels and from the causation of climate change over 100+ years. And of course, most of that is a result of the development in the North, in countries like the United States, the UK, and elsewhere. But certainly it's fair to say that more developed countries in the South, China, India, and others, are making contributions because we haven't made a full-scale enough transition into clean, renewable energy to replace polluting fossil fuels. And, you know, when I talk about fossil fuels, I'm not just talking about climate change. I'm talking about the pollution that fills the air in Delhi or Beijing. I'm talking about the clear evidence that pollution is impacting our health, and not just among poor people, among all of us. The particulates and what we breathe in is affecting our health, and particularly the health of our children. So that's why when I talk about climate, I always talk about climate and health, because it's not just an energy issue, it is also a health issue. So when we think about this big intergenerational transfer of wealth, I think that the older generation needs to join with the younger generation in doing whatever we can to interrupt this cycle of climate change and health impacts. And so from that perspective, we do need governments to address the systemic and structural issues, but we also need businesses and corporations to think that way as well. Just because the President of the United States does not want corporations to care about climate change doesn't mean you shouldn't care about climate change. Frankly, that's a political view of a dinosaur. It is just so out of touch with everything that we know, how we are living, what we are breathing, what we are seeing. We can't be told, don't pay attention to what has happened for political reasons. We have to say, no, we see it, and we're going to respond to it. So the systemic changes in both mitigation and adaptation must continue, despite some of the pushback coming from my country in particular. But I want to go further than that. I think businesses, individuals, communities, we all have a role to play, and we all have agency. We can do things. We can make a difference. And I remember being in India when I was Secretary of State for official business, of course, with the government. But also I met with businesses and groups of women and activists who were trying to provide cleaner cooking. Now think about that. Clean cooking. Why? Because so much of what is burned for cooking in the world still today is polluting. And the fourth leading cause of death in the world is respiratory illnesses. And there's a huge percentage of those that come to women and children because they are cooking food over polluting fires. And so we launched a big effort to change the way, to create a market for clean cooking utensils. Now that's a small thing, but it could have a big impact. So there is something for all of us to think about doing. And of course, I want to see governments do a much better job of fulfilling their responsibility and not turning the clock back and not pretending that climate change is not real. But I want to see businesses and philanthropies and individuals and communities coming up with their own ideas. And that's why, you know, at the Clinton Global Initiative, we partner with all these different groups. We partner with governments, and we partner with businesses, and we partner with philanthropies and community organizations, because I honestly believe now is the time for us to get creative, focused, and determined to address climate change in all the ways that each of us can.
Thank you for that very rousing call to action for collaboration and integrated approaches. Speaking of transformations, we're undergoing two major disruptions right now at the same time. The planet is changing, and the nature of work itself is also changing. And of course, I'm speaking to the climate transition as well as the the AI revolution that is underway. We have a massive AI summit going on right now in Delhi, as you know. And look, AI can be an incredible tool to address the climate challenge. I mean, it can really optimize renewable grids. AI can help us with hyper-local projections around flooding, strengthen agricultural resilience. But this technology is also consuming vast amounts of power, water, infrastructure, not to mention the fact that climate and AI together are fundamentally going to reshape labor markets and migration at a scale we've never seen before. So are we leveraging the present at the cost of the future?
We don't know yet. I'm very pleased that you're doing two things today that are about the future. This conference about climate right here in Mumbai, the conference about AI in Delhi. But we can't just talk about this. We've got to do much more to understand more deeply the interconnectivity between AI and climate, and really AI and everything. You know, as of now, it appears, other than, you know, having a conversation or asking a question to whatever, Chat GPT, Claude, Gemini, whoever you're talking to, the biggest advance has been in health. But we've seen some really exciting ways that AI can not just having aggregated information, but analyze it and provide in real time advice to physicians and other health practitioners. I'm very excited about that. But I think we would be naive not to recognize the potential threats that AI and its development is causing. I mean, we even hear from the people who run these big companies, they don't have any idea what is going to happen. They don't know how these technical advances are going to impact humanity. So if the people creating them don't know, then we have an obligation to say, let's slow down and figure out how we're going to manage this. And you mentioned the energy requirement for AI and the water requirement for running the big data server complexes. How is that going to affect the rest of us? How is that going to affect the energy supply, the cost of energy? How is it going to affect the clean water supply? Because for reasons that I don't pretend to understand, they claim they can't use recycled water. They have to use fresh water. Well, a lot of places in the world don't have an adequate supply of fresh water. So what does all that mean in terms of how we manage reaction to AI? But then the other issue that you alluded to, the labor market issue. What will we do with the millions of people who are going to be displaced because of AI? How will they be able to support themselves? How will society understand and relate to them? What obligation do we have to people who, through no fault of their own, see their jobs totally disappear? How do we get ahead of that problem? Because it's going to happen to us. And then with respect to the climate, in addition to the energy and the water issues, are we going to make sure that whatever information is available is, number one, accurate, so we can rely on it, whatever the data is, but number two, do we have the existing infrastructure to respond? Can our grids handle it? I'm speaking for the United States. I don't think our grids can handle whatever the new load is and whatever the new predictions are. So how do we plan for all of this to make it more of a positive than a negative, literally across the world? So I think that the AI conversations that are happening are important, but governments need to be ready to demand answers. The people running these companies are the richest people in the world. These companies are extremely powerful. They want to shape the future. They want to shape the politics of the future in every country in the world, but especially powerful leading countries like India. They want to be the determiners of how you respond to them instead of people through their elected governments determining how they should respond to us. So I think this is a big challenge for governments, but it should also be a challenge for the rest of us to push our governments to respond to. And, you know, a lot of people don't like the idea of regulation, but honestly, I think we've got to be willing to figure out how best to organize and regulate. Because what we learned with social media, we learned too late. Why are countries now regulating social media to try to prevent them from influencing our children? Because we have evidence that children have been negatively affected by social media. They have had greater increases, those who use it the most, or those who are most vulnerable to using it, in things like anxiety and depression and suicide and all the rest of it. But they've also lost their attention. I'll just give you a quick example. So in New York, we just passed a law that children could not bring their phones to school. Now, some people say, well, why'd they ever let them bring their phones to school? Because we didn't understand what a detriment to learning it was. So now we are seeing increased attention spans again in classrooms. We're seeing more engagement between students and teachers. We're seeing students actually talk to each other, not walk around with their heads down looking at their screens. So we learned. It was a hard lesson. It took a decade to learn that lesson. So let's not let AI influence us negatively and then learn the lessons, and it may be too late to try to do anything about energy, water, labor markets, unemployment, hallucinations, delusions that AI promotes. Let's figure out how we can deal with that ahead of time and try to shape it rather than be shaped by it.
I think that's some very, very wise words of advice. Secretary Clinton, moving on a slightly different track, I did want to talk to you a little bit about your own personal worldview. I remember after the 2016 election, you chose to go on a hike the very next day with all your friends and family, and you were greeting passers-by. Why did you choose connection in that moment of, quite frankly, must have been disappointment and setback? How has that shaped your experience of resilience?
Well, first of all, part of the reason why I care deeply about climate is because I really care deeply about nature and the environment. And I find it so reinvigorating, and it is something that I've always sought out, taking long walks, hiking, being in beautiful places, getting, you know, the extraordinary energy one gets from being in nature. But now we know, because people study everything, now we know that spending time in nature, literally if it's just in a city park, if it's watching a river or the ocean, if it's hiking in the hills, whatever it might be, actually does help reset your brain. So my feelings about climate change are really rooted in a great love of nature that, you know, my mother really instilled in me. I mean, just lying on the ground looking at a tree, what a miracle it is. And to know that as a human being, we did not do that. We did not create that. We did not create the oceans and the rivers and the mountains and the forests. We inherited it. And with that inheritance, as with any inheritance, should come a sense of responsibility. And so I care deeply about climate because I see the impacts that it's having, just the extraordinary damage it is doing, and what is now expected to be increasing temperatures that will flood islands, cause wildfires, increase the severity of storms, subject our bodies to extreme heat, because we have not cared for our planet. And, you know, sometimes when I say things like this, I see, you know, political eyes or business eyes kind of glaze over, like, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, if we don't take care of our world today, it will cost us more money. It will cost us more death and destruction. It will cost us more political conflict. That is not good for business, and it's not good for politics. So I come from a very personal perspective as to why I believe we have to keep trying, despite the naysayers, despite the cynics. We have to keep trying with all of our hearts and minds to really respect and cherish this planet that has given us everything. And we have done some really good things with it, but we have caused some great damage. So now we have to try our hardest to make amends.
I couldn't agree with you more. I did want to ask you the final question, and take your time on this. What is your advice for young Global South climate leaders?
Do not give in to the naysayers and the cynics. Do not doubt that you are engaged in historic, important work. Of course, you have to understand the politics. You have to understand the markets and the businesses. That is part of being an effective advocate. You have to know how hard you can push, what compromises you can take to try to go farther and get more done because you have built on it and you're ready to go from there. So I think the voices of young people in the Global South have to get much louder and much more insistent. And you also have to come up with creative solutions. And then you have to keep knocking on doors till other people listen to you. You know, I remember when I went to the COP conference in Dubai, I met with a group of young activists from the Global South. They had extraordinary ideas, but they couldn't get anybody to listen to them. They didn't bring their bankers with them. They didn't have bankers. They didn't know people on boards of directors of companies, but they were rooted in solving the problems they saw in their communities. So we have to be more open and understanding that ideas are going to come from everywhere, and they're going to be good ideas. Most of the global climate financing doesn't go to people like that. And very, very little of it goes to women who are activists and environmental innovators. So let's open our minds, and if you're a young climate activist, keep knocking on those doors, keep making your arguments, keep showing up, come to conferences like this, and keep working together. And, you know, as I said, the Clinton Global Initiative, we will help you. We will help introduce you to people. We will try to find networks that you can be part of. Come to our meeting in September, because this needs to be everybody working together, not one group, not one country, everybody working together. So that's my plea and really my gratitude, because you've got to pick up this baton that we have dropped, and you have to run to the finish line and take the rest of us with you.
Thank you, Secretary Clinton. I think on behalf of everyone here at Mumbai Climate Week,